This interview is a part of the Oklahoma Historical Society's Oral History Program, Living Legends Collection. This interview was originally conducted on the 25th of February, 1971. The interview was conducted by Mrs. Maydell Jones, and that's capital Maydell Jones. The interviewee is Mr. Amested E. Bradshaw, and that's capital Armested E. Bradshaw, capital Bradshaw, of Tulsa, Oklahoma. This material is being re-recorded on the 29th of October, 1986, for inclusion in the permanent collections of the Oral History Program by Judith Michener.
Nice moving. Now, all righty, thank you. This is Mrs. Maydell Jones interviewing Mr. Amested E. Bradshaw of Tulsa, February 25th, 1971. Mr. Bradshaw, there are many, many things that you can tell us about the beginning of Tulsa and about your life and the wonderful contributions that you have made. So we're going to let you start talking. Where were you born? Tell us everything about it.
Well, I came from Missouri, Wright County, Missouri, and I had a high school education, is all. And I went to teaching school. I taught 3 terms up there, and a friend of mine had come to Tulsa a couple of years before that. That was in 1900, and organized a bank down here, the City National Bank, at First and Main. So he wrote me and said if I'd come down, I could have a job as bookkeeper in the bank. So I arranged my affairs, and I tried to get him to let me finish my school, but he said, no, you'll have to come now.
How old were you?
18. No, I was 20, and almost 21. And so I came to Tulsa in November 25th, 1901, when I landed here in Tulsa. And I went in the bank down there, the City National Bank, First and Main, as bookkeeper. And I stayed with that bank until finally we started, another fella and I started what was known as the Bank of Oklahoma in the Bliss building at 3rd and Main. It was a state bank.
When was this?
That was 1907, just a little before statehood. And we organized the Bank of Oklahoma, state bank, and finally, I had been in the First National, as I told you. We got a deal on to combine the 2 banks. They were consolidated. And I went down, I was assistant cashier then when those 2 banks were put together at 2nd and Main. So I stayed with the First National Bank for 17 years and went...
Well, actually, you were with one of the first banks in Tulsa.
Yeah, there were only 2 here when I came here.
I see.
The First National and the City National.
Mm-hmm.
First National was the larger bank. It was the first bank organized.
Mm-hmm.
It was, when it started, it was called the Tulsa Banking Company, State Bank. And just about 1900, they made a national bank out of it, called it the First National Bank of Tulsa. So,
How big was Tulsa at that time?
Well, it was about 1,500 population. There was Sapulpa, Claremore, Veneta, and Tulsa were all about the same size. The question, which one would be the city? The Sapulpa had the division point of the Frisco Railroad, and it looked like it might be the one. But Muskogee was out ahead of all of us. It was about, several times larger than any of these towns up here, because Muskogee was head of the 5 civilized tribes. They had that for their headquarters, and all the lawyers came to Oklahoma and went to Muskogee. Well, when Glen Pool was opened up and they drilled a well down there, that was about 1907 or 8, long in there, when they drilled that well. That opened the Glen Pool, and the people that drilled the first well lived in Tulsa, and the people flocked in here to, this was headquarters for the oil business, and they just came and came and came. Tulsa grew and grew. We passed Muskogee in a little while. It was 3 times as big as Tulsa when that well was drilled down there. But we wasn't long till we went by Oklahoma City. We forgot about Sapulpa and Claremore and Veneta. We were just little, stayed little. We grew.
Well, this made a tremendous difference in the banking business.
Oh yes, yes. We had our bank just really went to town. The 2 that commenced organizing, there was some more banks started. One every now and then would start. State banks but then the bank that I was in consolidated with the First National Bank, and I was in the group that controlled after the consolidation. I was fortunate in that, so I became cashier of the bank, and then vice president, and finally president of the First National Bank. No, I never was president. I take that back. I was executive vice president, and I left the First National Bank and went down to the Oklahoma Natural Gas Company. We got in receivership, and Judge Kennemer appointed me receiver for Oklahoma Natural. And I went down there and stayed there a while, and the Exchange National Bank had some trouble, so they had reorganized and changed the name to National Bank of Tulsa. And they had a man from New York that was running, and he wasn't very popular here, and finally had to leave. The people didn't like him at all, and so they began to look around for president of National Bank of Tulsa. And they wanted to get a man that was known here in Tulsa, and that the people knew and had confidence in, and I'd been here a long time then. So they came to me and offered me the job as president of the National Bank of Tulsa. And I thought, I liked the gas business, but I didn't know much about it, and I thought I did know something about the banking business. So I finally got arranged so I could become president of National Bank of Tulsa, and I remained on the board of Oklahoma Natural Gas Company until this day. I'm still on the board down there, and also been a director since I retired from National Bank of Tulsa. I'm still connected with it on the board. Married J.M. Hall was when I came to Tulsa, he was a prominent, had the biggest store, general store in Tulsa, and I married his daughter. So I have 2 daughters living. I had 2 sons. They both died, but I have 2 daughters, married daughters, living in Tulsa. I have a family, and they're wonderful, both of them. Dorothy is the younger everybody called her Jean. So they are very happy, and I'm retired, live at the Mayo Hotel, and I'm very well situated.
You've seen Tulsa grow, haven't you?
I've seen it from 1,500 to 330,000. That's been a tremendous growth in Tulsa, and it was capital of the oil business, and they all settled here. That's what made Tulsa really, the oil business. But that brought in other things, and it's now has a lot of, besides oil, back of it.
Can you tell us something about the very beginning of Tulsa before statehood?
Well, it was just about like Claremore, as I said, Claremore and Sapulpa and Veneta, a country town. But it always was, it had a lot of people living here that were ambitious. They wanted to see Tulsa. They knew there'd be another large town besides Oklahoma City. Muskogee was bigger than Tulsa, 3 times as big, but when they brought in the Glen Pool, that just brought us out, and we passed Muskogee right soon. So the oil companies moved here. The Prairie Oil and Gas Company was a Standard Oil Company that had its headquarters in Independence, Kansas, and Harry Sinclair became head of it and moved it to Tulsa. That was one of the big companies first, and the oil companies then began to come to Tulsa, just one after another, organized new ones, and like Sunray. Sunray was organized in Oklahoma City, but they finally made Tulsa their headquarters, and it's been here ever since. So there's a lot of other oil companies here. Of course, some of them have. Sinclair was one of the main ones. They still have offices here, but they've consolidated with Richfield, and most of the oil companies have consolidated. Sunray became a part of the Sun Company, and so we don't have as many big companies, but they all have headquarters here. So the oil business is still headquartering in Tulsa for Oklahoma.
Besides all of your banking background, which of course has been your life, I'm sure there are many hobbies that you've had that have extended all through your life. So let's get into that and see if you can tell us a few things. You started playing baseball way back?
Oh yes, when I was very just old enough to play, I soon got good enough. Up in the small town in Missouri that I came from, I was on the top team there, and I learned to play baseball pretty well, I thought. Came down here, and Tulsa was a country town, so they had a baseball team like all. Veneta had one, Sapulpa had one, Okmulgee, and we played all those towns. Every year we'd play them, and Tulsa had a good baseball club. We got in professional baseball came here pretty early then, and Tulsa got in that, and so from that time on, I never played in that. I never played as a professional ball player. I just played with the amateur back in the early days. But I go to see all the games I can. I love baseball.
Tell us some of your experiences with baseball.
Well,
way back.
Well, I had some of the good things. We lived in a town up in Missouri, in Webster County, Missouri. That's about 35 miles east of Springfield. And Marshfield was the county seat. And it was about the same size as the town I lived in, Seymour. And we played baseball against Marshfield was the county seat of Webster County. So we'd first home run I ever got was at Marshfield. This had a great pitcher. They could beat everybody because of this good pitcher. And he was throwing me high balls are coming up here and too high to hit at. But finally, I could tell when they come over, I got about 2 balls and no strikes on me. And it was coming up there and curving down. So I happened to catch one of those good and knocked it clear out of the country. That was my first home run. He gave me quite a reputation. And I thought I was really something after that. So then I got to be a pretty good batter, I thought. But finally, the pros took over baseball, and then the amateurs get out. They don't mount much after that.
Somebody mentioned a Chandler Game. When did that happen?
What?
A Chandler Game.
Oh, that was before pro. That was amateurs, and we had a pretty good team, and Chandler got hold of a pitcher down there that was good. His name was Turk Dunham. And we went down there and run a special train from Tulsa to Chandler. You know where Chandler is, down halfway to Oklahoma City. So we went down there, and this fella just beat us terribly. I never saw such a pitcher. He could just build such curves I never saw. So we hired him, brought him up here, and we could beat everybody. He was tough. He could just beat all the amateurs, but he never got into professional baseball. I wondered why he never did, but he was a wonderful amateur pitcher. He just had everything, but he could sure beat us when he was with Chandler, that little town of Chandler.
You were a left-handed batter, huh?
Yes, there's lots of left-handed batters. About half. There's a right-handed pitcher. The curve when he throws what's known as a sinking out curve to the left, away from the batter when he's right-handed. If you're batting left-handed, it curves towards you, so you've got a big advantage. And against right-handed pitchers, the left-handed batter are very good. And I happen to bat left-handed, and I got to be a pretty good batter.
Some of the men who worked with you, are any of them still around, Tulsa?
I think back there then,
Uh-huh.
That ball team we had, I think every one of them, I'm the only living member.
Is that right?
Not a one of them still living.
You remember some of the names?
Oh, yes. I'd have to, let's see, we had a pitcher, Indian, nearly a full-blood, left-handed pitcher. And let's see, what was his name? I forget his name, but he was awful good, left-handed, and so we used him as long as it lasted. And pitchers don't last too long, they'll come and go. But we seemed to get a hold of pretty good pitchers. That fella, and J.H. McBurney, who was president of the National Bank of Commerce, he was our pitcher first until we got hold of this Indian. And Jim got older, and he was a very devoted Christian. He wouldn't play on Sunday, so we were up against a tough deal, and we had a lot of Sunday games. He and his brother Sam were 2 of our best players. Neither one of them play on Sunday, so we had a tough time to having a pitcher. But we developed some pitchers and got along pretty good.
Who all did you play
Well,
around here?
We played, of course, always played Muskogee. They had an amateur team. They all thought they got into professional ball before we did. But there was Veneta, Claremore, Sapulpa, and the towns on down towards Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City was so much bigger than Tulsa that they didn't pay attention to us. We didn't play them. They were the capital, and they big stuff, you know. They wouldn't. Tulsa was just a small town, and we began to grow and become more noticeable from that time on.
Then you played golf a lot.
Oh yes, I started a little late in life, when I started playing golf, but I had a batting left-handed. Golf players don't play left-handed; they turn around, play golf right-handed. 99 out of 10, or more than that, 99 out of 100. There's hardly any left-handed golf players anymore, or there never were, for that matter. But when you went into golf, by all means, if you were left-handed, you had to turn around and learn to swing right-handed. So I had that trouble, but I overcame that, and now I feel the right-handed is natural to me, and left-handed, I couldn't hit anything left-handed.
What about these holes in one?
I made 3 holes in one.
Oh, you're bragging.
I made the same one at number 5 at Tulsa Country Club. I made that twice in one, and number 6 at Southern Hills when we went down, when a lot of us that played golf quit the Tulsa Country Club when Southern Hills was started. We went down there, so I made number 6 in one, so that made 3. There's a lot of fine golf players that have played golf all their life and never make a hole in one. It's just luck, you know.
I think it might have something to do
Of
with
course
good golfers.
Well, you've got to shoot up close to the hole to give it a chance to roll in. And I made the same hole out there twice in one. And then another one. One at the Tulsa Country, 2 at the Tulsa Country Club and 1 at Southern Hills. And,
When you first started, now tell us about the banking business when you first started.
Well, I was in the City National Bank in Tulsa, and when I came here, there were 2 banks here. The First National was on the east side of Main Street between First and Second, about the middle of the block, facing west. The City National Bank, the one I went into, was on the corner of First and Main, northwest corner, 1-story building.
And you did all the work, huh?
Oh, I washed the windows, swept out, and did all the work and kept the books. And the First National was the largest bank. It was organized first, and it was about twice as big as the City National. So we worked for business as hard as we could, and the City National Bank and the First National grew and finally consolidated. And I went with the First National Bank until I retired.
You were friends with almost all of your customers at that time.
Oh yeah. When I first went in, I always thought I knew every customer we had. When I quit the National Bank of Tulsa about 6 years ago, I didn't know 1/10 of them. No, not. They outgrew all the little country bank. We became a city bank.
Yeah.
And changed the whole style. That had a lot of tellers and a beautiful banking room. So I enjoyed banking. I loved it. And when I came, I was the rankest kind of an amateur. I never was hardly inside of a bank before I came to Tulsa and went to work in the City National Bank. And I had to learn how to keep the books. And about the first month was terrible to me. I never hardly slept at night from worrying about balancing those books. We didn't have any adding machines, not a one. Had to add everything up in your head, and you soon learn not to make any errors. If you did hunting errors, it was take about 9/10 of your time. If you've got to balance the books even to a penny, you know. If you're off 10 cents, why, you look for 10 cents just the same as you look for $100.
And they won't let you put that dime in, will they?
No, you can't do that. You've got to find the play where you made the mistake, and that was a tough deal.
You've held some very responsible honors and positions in the banking world. Would you like to tell us about them?
I was president of Oklahoma Bankers Association. That's quite an honor, and you have to be one of the well-known to be that they're just elected, you know, by they meet every year. The Oklahoma Bankers couldn't do Oklahoma Bankers Association, and they elect the president, and I was finally elected. You just hold that office 1 year. Usually you second or third vice president, you step up one every year. Finally you're executive vice president, first vice president, and then the next year they elect you president. So I went through all of that, and I knew all the bankers, and I knew everyone in Oklahoma. We were building a town here in the banking business, you know. Of course, Oklahoma City was the capital and a little bigger than we are, and they're tough competition. We go out accounts from country banks, we call them, in Claremore and Muskogee, and we the bank here, the National Bank of Tulsa and the First National, same. They have an account from every bank in Tulsa. National Bank of Tulsa has an account from every bank in Tulsa except the First National. So First National's the same. They have an account from practically every bank in Tulsa because they're the two biggest banks, and so they elect a president of the clearinghouse. All banks belong to the clearinghouse, members of the clearinghouse, and any problems come up, they meet and thrash that out. The problems that bother all banks. So the banking business in Oklahoma's in pretty good hands now. It's just been doing well. Haven't had any big trouble in several years. Way back there, they did have a lot of it. That's before I was even in the banking business. To mount to anything, I was bookkeeper when they had some big failures in Oklahoma City, and there's one fellow that owned the bank in Bartlesville, Oklahoma City, and Tulsa, and all three of them busted.
Who was that?
Well, I forget his name now. He wasn't a banker to start with. He was a promoter. But he had got the biggest banks. He had the biggest bank in Oklahoma City and the biggest in Tulsa. And they didn't finally close. They got some new capital in and new officers. He got out, sent one or two of them to the penitentiary. So it's been a wonderful experience to me for the 30-odd years I've been in the banking business.
You're the type of person who isn't just at home with the banker either, are you?
Well, no, that says in there I'm at home with most any kind of a person.
Well, I can tell that from this morning.
Yes, and I'm never nervous when I'm talking to important people. I don't feel like they have anything on me. I feel like I know just about as much as they do, and I feel that important, and that helps if you're nervous and feel like you're not in his class. Why, that's a tough deal. You feel like you're just as good as he is. You can carry on your conversation pretty well. Game Club up here. We called it the Verdigris Club. It was up on the Verdigris River. You know where that is, east of town, and we built a clubhouse up on the hill there, and we had about 30 members back there. And finally, when the Depression came on, we lost a lot of them that had to drop out. We finally sold the land up there, and it's that land. We had 32 or 300 acres right in the bottom along the river, and that land now is selling for way up towards $1,000 an acre.
How much did you pay for it?
I paid $20. I got it together. I paid $20 an acre for it, and we kept it. We bought it in 1928 and sold it in just a few years ago. Of course, we sold it to Bill Skelly. Bought it from us, and he kept it as a ranch. And but and we kept it. We bought it in 1928 and sold it in just a few years ago. Of course, we sold it to Bill Skelly. Bought it from us, and he kept it as a ranch. And but finally he sold it. When he died, the estate sold it, and they're cutting it up now. It's right along the river, and they've steamboats are running up the river now by the Verdigris Club. The whistle that you can hear about that.
Do you ever think you'd see a steamboat in Oklahoma?
No, I never did. But that's a nice river. It's about I think it has to be 150 feet wide and 9 feet deep. They keep it that way. These lakes up above, they let the water out and feed it into the down. So from Tulsa, we're at the head of navigation on the river. They come up the Arkansas River to Muskogee and then up the Verdigris. They didn't come on up the Arkansas to Tulsa. They could have, but there's some. It would have cost a lot more money. They could use the Verdigris better. It was narrower and better banks. The Arkansas had lots of sand in it, and the sand would wash you in and fill it up, and it was a better deal to come up the Verdigris from Muskogee. So out have the port out on east of town on the Verdigris River. That's the big thing for Tulsa, I think. You can take a boat from here to the Mississippi River.
Could you tell us some things about statehood, about when Oklahoma went into the Union? Some of your memories of that time?
Well, we were always fighting for statehood, and they'd have this. When they organized the state of Oklahoma, they had the Constitutional Convention and adopted the Constitution and all that, and the people that were running things back there, the Democratic Party were running it, and it was pretty bad. But we finally got the Democratic Party. I was a Democrat just a short few years ago. The Democrats have up till this governor, and don't put it in your. I didn't
Politics.
Back there. I didn't pay too much attention to politics. And I was supposed to be a Democrat. I thought I was because my father was, but I didn't. I was never active in politics. I attended one they said everybody ought to go to these primaries they have, or these conventions they have. And finally I thought I'd go, and I went, and my side, things come up, you know, and they take sides in there and vote on it. And I was on the side that we had 80 some odd votes, and the other had about 20, and they got up and left. They bolted the convention, went up to the courthouse, and met and sat there as in, and the governor, what's his name, was governor then, and he turned our stuff down and took theirs. We had 86, I believe, and they had about 22. And that's, so I quit. I said, I'm through. I'm not going to go. I never go to another one. You're just wasting your time.
Being a Democratic state has had quite a bearing, though, on business in the Oklahoma, has it not?
Well, yes. Of course, the southern states are Democratic, but of course, Oklahoma has gone Republican a few times, and it's a little different from most of them, but it's pretty close. And I didn't think this guy'd get in, as I said, but he did. And when it's close like that, things like this will happen. And I don't know. We just have to take it. That's all I know. I don't know what you can do about it. I'm awful sorry. I'd love to see Bartlett go ahead. He's a fine man. He just is honorable, and he tries to do the right thing. And he's proud of his record while he was in as governor. He thought he was going to be elected.
He was good for the state.
Oh my, yes, wonderful. But
did the banking business show reaction when he was in?
No, they don't. They're not supposed to get into politics. You know, they're vulnerable. They if the banks here would go and do things against this guy as governor, he can sure deal the banks a lot of misery. So they just have to take it. That's all. And awful sorry, but a lot of bankers won't talk politics now. They're afraid because he's threatened to do almost anything to them. I don't know if I can
philosophy
say anything.
of
That's
banking.
the way I've always felt. I've felt like I had to please the customer. That's what I've felt all the time. You can't run a bank if you don't please your customers. You go downhill in a place of up, and that's been my thought all the time. Try to please your customers. Do what they want to do if you can. Of course, run a good, solid bank. You got to keep it solid. That's the fundamental thing.
You can run a bank and make sound investments just as
Yeah.
well as you can make bad ones.
Oh yes, that's you just have to be. Don't be a chump and go and get a lot of stuff you have to charge off. They're charging off on the banks nowadays. Charge off more than we used to make.
Is that right?
Oh my, yeah, all of them are like that. They just they kind of go wild. But they seem to think that's the thing to do. My goodness, if I'd make a loan of $15,000 or $25,000, and it would have to be charged off, I'd feel like I ought to resign from the bank and get out of the banking business because I was that big a chump to make a loan to a guy that would go broke. Some of the banks that make loans, and the guy will sign the note and never even renew it once. Now that kind of a loan goes bad, have to be charged off. It was bad when he made it. It was just a bad judgment on the banker to ever make such a loan as that. I always felt like I could talk to a customer 5 or 10 minutes and tell whether it's any good or not. And I believe I can do that. I used to be able to do it. We never did. we'd go through the year and wouldn't have probably $1,000 to charge off when I was running the bank. We weren't running that kind of a bank.
Well, why is it so?
Well, they just think you've got to just take all kinds of chances out of the way. That's just your philosophy, the way you think you ought to operate a bank. I don't. Frank Phillips paid a compliment to me. He said, "Now, Brad, they call me Brad," said he just has the knack of being able to talk to a guy a little while and tell whether he's good or bad. And I do. I just feel like I can almost do that every time. Let a fellow talk to me for 10 or 15 minutes and I'll tell you whether he's any good or not. Good, sound man to lend money to. And that's the kind you got to make loans you can collect, you know, or you
Does
go
this
broke.
have anything to do with the young rich now?
No, I don't think so. No, I don't think it's the rich that are hurting the banks.
No, I mean these young people who it's so easy they're always in debt.
Yeah, you'll just always have that kind. But we never did deal with them.
I see.
If we
But
could help
now
it.
it's a common thing.
Yeah, oh yes. There seem to be more of them running loose now than there used to be.
More brass, I
Yeah.
guess, rather than gold.
Yeah. It's about time we've been in here an hour.
We have?
Yeah.
Well, what do you think about the future of Tulsa?
I think it's wonderful. I think Tulsa going to make the city of Oklahoma. It has the best prospects now. This Arkansas River deal is the biggest thing we've had for a long time, and it's going to help Tulsa tremendously, I think. And most everybody else thinks the same thing. It's a big thing to have. You can ship stuff out of here by boat, you know. That's slow freight, but it's cheap. All this paper that these two newspapers use here coming up the river now, it comes cheap. They get it way in advance, you know, and store it out there. They build a big warehouse out there, and they've got it filled with paper now. So, I think Tulsa is going to be the East City. It'll be as big as Oklahoma City. I think two of them are going to be the two cities neck and neck, and that's. I think Tulsa's done darn well to keep up with Oklahoma City. With this population, even we're 330 start from nothing. Of course, they being the capital that's a tremendous help.
Yeah.
So we start out with a handicap. But Tulsa's a wonderful city.
You started very young with your cultural activities.
Oh, yes, that's right. And they're doing everything now. There's a lot of wonderful people here. People that come to Tulsa are, the big majority of them are fine folks that come from the East and locate here. A few crooks will get in here. Can't help that. Just have to take it as it comes.
Well, with people like you helping build a city, it couldn't help but go forward.
Thank you. I've seen it grow from nothing, and I've just always been so proud of Tulsa.
How many banks are there in Tulsa now?
Oh, about, I'll have to count them up. There's about 16 or 18.
Mm-hmm.
When I came here, there were only two.
Mm-hmm.
The First National, and then we had the City National. There's two for 2-3 years, several years.
Oh.
Things are different now.
Oh, well, it's been a joy, Mr. Bradshaw, and we do thank you so very much for giving us your time and your reminiscing, and it's going to mean much to many people, we're sure.
Well, don't put anything in there that would embarrass me.
You haven't said anything that
Well,
would
I
embarrass you.
had it. I could get off on some politics or something. Usually I don't mind talking tough when it's necessary, but I don't like the way the thing's going now.
Well, I'll turn it off before we get tough.
Because politically, I don't like the way it's going now.
Mm-hmm. Well,
To get sound.